Well, if you receive from an architect or a survey firm a DWG file, the first step that I would take is to install Autodesk's DWG Trueview viewer. And I'm using it now and looking at a typical file, and it has a little symbol on the bottom left which is like a set square, so it tells us we're in layout space. There are lots of layouts here. I'll go to another one and I'll come back to the proposed site plan, and there we are. Can you see there's information outside of the floating viewport, but we get some idea of what's in the drawing. So what we know is this DWG file is going to contain an awful lot of layout views. If we go into the model and look at it here, we can't actually see the model at all, and I suspect that's because when I opened this file up with Autodesk's DWG Trueview, it gave me a warning. Firstly, that the file was not created via an authorized application to handle DWG, but it also said there are missing external references. So this file, this DWG file, is missing a whole lot of important information which is somewhere else and hasn't come across with the DWG file. So our advice to our user is, when you want to get a base plan, before you do anything else, install Autodesk DWG Trueview. It's free. Install it and use it to open up files, because you can then go back to the architectural firm and say, hey, you haven't given us any of the external information. We can't look here at the model space view, and could you send the external references? Well, just to make absolutely sure that we're clearly missing the model, I'll come up here and pick Zoom Extents, and there we are. Well, the next tool that I suggest you work with is one called the Oda File Converter, and we've got an input folder, DWG, an output folder, and I've specified the output version. We're bringing DWG in, and I want to move a DXF file out from here. I'll choose 2007 DXF, and if you watch down here we'll see some auditing going on, and yes, I've just been rehearsing it, so it's reading and writing, and it's forming a DXF file. And remember, the object of this exercise is to get the information into gCADPlus. So we can go back into gCADPlus. I'll go File and New. I'll start a brand new drawing without a template. We don't want to complicate things, and we'll say File and DXF Tools. We want to bring a DXF file in, and here it is, Exeter DXF, and there's our information, and we'll go straight into the model. You can see we did bring across a whole lot of information from the architect. Right click and Zoom Extents. There's probably quite a lot missing, but this is the information that we want, and we can get rid of all of the other information. So I'd be inclined at this stage just to set up a crossing window, and I'd be inclined to copy that to the clipboard, start another brand new drawing, and then paste that information that we've copied. So we hope we're taking just a simple amount of information. We'll put 0, 0 in there for a base point, right click and pick Zoom Extents, and so here we are. We've got a pretty small drawing. Let's look at its file size. Is less than a megabyte, so it's reasonable, and we've probably got a few layers to come across. No, just site boundary and so on. So we've certainly simplified things quite a lot. These are not blocks. They've been broken up into individual elements. So I'd be inclined to start working on a little bit of layering so that we can work comfortably with this drawing. So let's see how we've gone with distances. We can measure from our site from this point here. So the site is 85 meters by 30 meters or so. And I think that ties in pretty well. So with a fairly long-winded series of steps, we've converted a DWG file and brought the base information into gCADPlus, and now we can send this on to our user, who can then use it as a base plan. Or we can gain quite a lot of information from the original Trueview viewer, and we find, if we look at I've done a screen grab here, and clearly these trees are to be removed, and there's an indicator to that effect. So we can come back into our gCADPlus drawing and select all these symbols with a red outline and just move them to a layer called trees to be removed. So that group through there, the plan is for those to be removed. And then we're faced with the problem of how do we site the building onto the site. Now, to my eye, that's going to be a very tight fit. But let's now go into layers and find that trees to remove and turn that one off. So now we have cleaned up the site. So we now need to make a block of the plan and then find in this drawing some information, and we'll be able to cite the building plan. But you would recommend, of course, going to the site and just doing some triangulation to check that you've put things in exactly the right place. Well, remembering that in this particular example we were given base information which had a site plan and then over to the right footprint of the house and so on. What I've done is I've gone back in fact into DWG Trueview and done a screen grab so that if I zoom in on here I can get some dimensions. And what I've done is to offset the boundaries from the bottom and to the side. I've also made a block, and you'll see it now when I select it. I made a block of the footprint. So let's pick it, and I've put a base point, the corner of the house. So I've got a dimension from that corner from both sides. So now I should be able to move that base point to the intersection of there. And if we zoom out a little, I hope you can see that the proposed dwelling is sitting relatively close to where we want it. Now at this point, let me just close that down, and at this point here I'd probably remove those offsets. Now the drawing is very big at the moment and quite unwieldy, so this little diagram here is the one we want. I put the trees to be removed on a separate layer, so at this point I'd be inclined to copy that into a different drawing. But what I would point out is that the dimensions aren't precise. I would want to go back and do some triangulation so I can locate the footprint there accurately. It's this point here, the ID of that point there. So if I use the ID command and left click the mouse button, that gives my X and Y position there, but we would need to check it by putting some dimensioning in. You'd want to go to the site, measure from that corner across, and then measure from the top corner to get it precise. But I think we've done a reasonable job of converting a DWG file to get it into the point where we can now use it. Well, I would point out that if you go to the file size here, it's still large, 8.3 megabytes. That's huge given the amount of information in here. But what's happened in the DXF translation is that if we just pick along here, can you see that those symbols are composed of, and these are the existing trees, so they are composed of short line segments. There are thousands and thousands of individual entities in here, and I'd certainly be inclined to take some of those, and I'd be replacing those symbols with one of our own and then eliminating those. It's tedious, but you'll get a much better result and a much cleaner file and much smaller. However, I think this is workable for the particular job.